Everybody on YouTube. So today we're going to be finally talking about this rear wiper motor install. I wanted to wait until I had finally sourced the cover to make it look nice and neat, but I probably would have had to have taken it off for that video anyways. And although this looks crappy and unprofessional, it's a good way for me to demonstrate what I did and how I did it and why. So when I sourced this motor, I didn't have any of the previous wiring that needed to go up to the center console, and I didn't have any of the previous wiring that went up and was run through the hatch. Reason being, this is the third hatch that I bought for this car. Part of the reason why I bought it was because I had the third brake light, which I also had to kind of wire in from, not necessarily scratch, but from the car side. Yes, I needed to figure out how I was going to make that work. That's actually tied into the left brake light. But anyways, so what we did here was the ground, which is this brown wire right here. Brown typically on Porsches is going to be a ground, especially on these older generation cars. But the ground for that is tied back here, and it's that little guy right there, where the grounds for the rest of the lighting and stuff like that is. That's all tied back here. I'm not going to show you the rest of that ugly wiring because I need to clean it up and cable manage. Those are run through the hatch to try to make them look as clean as possible. From an old set of those LED headlights I had, those plastic like wire shielding things were spares, so I just kind of split them open and wrap the wires around that to make it look less like just dangling wires, and at least look like there's a harness that gets plugged in as it would on any modern car. It's not really invasive to me. It doesn't bother me too much. It probably won't please somebody at a Concours, but this is a 200,000 mile car, so it's not really going in any Concours anytime soon. So that was the ground, and that's where it got routed into back here. Now for the power. Well, I didn't have any of the initial wiring for the switch in the center console. There was the positive lead that supplies 12 volts, constant 12 volts with keyed ignition underneath the dash, and the green plug, and that was what typically would plug into the wiring harness that would then go up to the center console and into the switch. Now the switch back there is going to be the same thing. It's going to be just spade connector the same way the rest of everything else is, so that if I needed to easily remove it or anything like that, nothing proposes like a safety hazard or something like that. I can just easily remove it, and it's gone, and it's out of the way, and it's like it was never there. The switch I sourced from, I believe it was 944 only. Those guys are awesome. I bought that off of their eBay store, and it's a great condition switch. This motor I just sourced from a private seller, and it came with the blade and everything. So the power side, getting back to the wiring, goes from all the way up here, runs down the hatch, part of this little wiring harness thing, gets tucked in behind the vinyl and the carpeting and the seats, all the way down through the door sill, all the way up and around where the rest of the wiring is for the fuses and the relays and all that kind of stuff, and that gets tucked into the center console plastic. There's a little tunnel in there where some wiring goes for like the mirror switches and stuff, and it gets plugged into that switch, and when you close the switch, it just completes the circuit, and the motor will wipe back and forth with just a positive and a negative, so you don't need both of these plugged in. Now I'm not 1,000,000,000% sure what this third terminal is, so I'm cautious as to give any sort of advice or what it is used for, because I'm just not familiar with it and I don't want to provide the wrong info. My best guess is that since the motor runs back and forth and it actually completes a full sweeping travel with just a positive and a negative terminal on there, this, I'm assuming, is what will, every time you shut the motor off, automatically return it back to its home position. Because as this sits right now, when you kill the switch, it'll just stop in wherever point in its travel that it currently is. I don't 100% know because I've never had a working wiper motor. I've never had a wiper motor in general, and then there's not really too much information out there on these as to how to wire them and all that kind of stuff. Although I will say Iridesce has a great video that goes over installing this the correct way with if you have all the factory wiring and stuff like that. I kind of had to go a different route because I didn't have the factory wiring, so that's kind of what this is more geared towards. But we go up to the switch behind the cigarette or the ashtray, and positive and negative, same thing. It's one is connected to the ground, and the other is connected to the positive terminal on the switch that will close the circuit, and there you go. And it only works with keyed ignition. So if the when the ignition's on, that's when that 12 volts will energize, and away you go. The only real difficult thing about this entire install, just aside from just making sure that you don't screw up the wiring, you have to kind of be extra diligent with that, is sort of figuring out where the home travel is, where the home position for the wiper is. With the blade on there, because it takes a little bit of adjusting to get it right, and that's true with any car. I used to work at a body shop, and that was always a big thing. If we had a car with a rear wiper, you kind of had to get lucky on the first try to position it right at its home position. Otherwise, it's swinging off all over the place because it's not lined up correctly. That was probably the most difficult part. But it took maybe, I don't know, just a few hours to kind of get everything figured out, sourced in, figure out how I was going to do all my wiring runs. And then that's it. So I hope that helps. And if anybody wants a little bit more info or maybe a little bit more in-depth explanation of how I did everything, then feel free to just comment or post, and I'll try to answer those as soon as I see them. Typically, I don't get notifications for comments and stuff, which is kind of weird. So if I suck at replying, I promise that's why, but I will eventually try to get to you and answer your questions. So I hope that helps, and I hope that if you don't have any of that wiring underneath your dash, that you still feel confident enough to go grab one of these if you want to. I live in Arizona. This is completely unnecessary. It doesn't snow here at all, and I found that after installing it, even with it raining, I don't really use it all too much. But I still think it's really cool, and I do plan on driving this car up to some snow, and that will definitely help. But I will tell you right now, the number one reason why I went and did this is because it does get super cold, and when you leave your car outside, this whole piece of glass just turns into frosted glass, and you can't see out of it. So even with a heater, it's just nice to be able to press a button in the car while you're driving and just kind of clear out your back window so that you can see. So I'm super looking forward to that. The defroster on this car actually does work, and that is the next thing that relative to the hatch needs to get done. And I will say right now, if you're looking at buying new hatch struts, stay away from these. Do not buy these. They are too strong, and as soon as you put them on and you're all excited about having your hatch struts on, you'll go close this, and it doesn't matter if you do the two-hand method, the one-hand method, whatever, the pushing in. It's just too strong, and you will pop this glass out of this frame, and then you will need a new hatch. I've now gone through 3 hatches. I don't have these on my car unless I have the hatch already opened up and propped up, and this just props them. So when I go to close this hatch, I'll lift the hatch up, pop one side off, pop the other side off, and then close the hatch normally that way. Otherwise, you get all this, and this is water stains on the carpet. And I'm not 100% sure on how to take care of those, but this thing is honestly so old that it might be just time to get a nice customized one or something from Lloyd Mats. I've seen that they have some pretty nice ones. A little bit pricey for me, but hey, whatever works. So, and that is how I turned yet again another 3-minute video, what should have been, into a 10-minute video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.